You know, that's you know, we took it all away from one. That it's easy today to talk about what we just did. I want us to begin to see the roots of what we just did that goes back beyond Jesus, goes back to the Old Testament, that when people were involved in the same struggles and they had to win them the same way, and they had God on their side and they won then, and we've been winning now. Not to understand that its roots come out of a moral and spiritual understanding of life is to miss the real meaning of what we have done. And I am very concerned about understanding it like that. See, I delight in the 8th century prophets. There was something about them. They were really the closest thing to Jesus. They were the introduction into Jesus. And they were called the minor prophets. But you see, they only wrote small documents. But you see, they were not minor, either in mind or in action. And it was their minds and their actions that moved average people to do what only average people can do. And that is to create the kind of world in which they want to live. And ultimately, that's what this month is about. That's what it's all about, is how do we create the world that we desire. And we find ourselves struggling between the mighty and the not so mighty. Amos was one of those great prophets. He was a prophet of people's movements. It has been people's movements that has changed the world more than all the legislation. In fact, the legislations came after the people's movements, when people demanded that they live in a new world. Sometimes the people's movements even grew out of wars, but that was the people's movements that changed it all. And when a prophet like Amos speaks, you can hear every people's movement from Ezekiel to Martin Luther King. Amos is a measuring rod for the old as well as the new, and the new as well as the old. He was a prophet who didn't know he was a prophet. He was a prophet that didn't have the regalia. He was a prophet that, in fact, he was a very simple man. He, in fact, was a peasant. He was a sheep herder. They don't even have jobs for sheep herders anymore. And what he saw, but God called him to preach. God realized there was something in this man that was just a sheep herder, living his life with the sheep, that was needed in the great cities. And as a result, he called him to preach. He called him to preach, and Amos began to study, and he studied night and day. Is that because he wanted to be ready for whatever God called him for? And what he saw in the politics of Israel, he had been looking at in the fields of Israel. Is that what he saw going on, that he'd been a herder for, he saw was going on in the city, and there was no one to herd those that were out of position. You see, he saw the big sheep push others off the pastures. He saw them break down fences that was protection for the little sheep. He saw them. He saw the big sheep eat the food and the provisions that were set aside, not for them, but for the rest of the sheep. He saw what was going on. In fact, he saw that those in the city decided that size was going to determine ethics. And what he knew about God would be that the little sheep had to be taken care of. In fact, we have scriptures that Jesus asked Peter even to take care of the little sheep. Peter, we don't find one of those about the big sheep. It was the little sheep that Jesus was concerned about. It's the little sheep that God's concerned about. How did Lincoln say it? If God hadn't like the average one of us, he wouldn't made so many of us, right? And the problem with the big sheep is out there, he saw there was no one to stop them. And he was weak to do it because he was just, there with the field with only a staff. But he was doing his best, and God figured he was doing good enough to call him. But call him to go into the city. And when he went into the city, he saw that the same thing was happening in the city that was happening on those pastures. That the big sheep were taking advantage of the little sheep. And something had to be done. In fact, he likened the big sheep in the field to, in fact, the animals of the field. I want us to understand that. I particularly brought that in to show that there's animals who, in fact, work off of other folk.
All right, preacher.
Take what they have, break down the field. And that's where average people must organize to change all of that. To the extent that we organize, to that extent we can have the world we want to live in. When we stop organizing and stop thinking that we are less than, instead of understanding that together we're more than. And when we understand that God has already given us, within us, the ability to create the world we want to live in, not the world that someone else wants us to have to live in. It is that understanding that's basic. When Amos preached in the cities, he started to preach something, the brilliance of prophets were that they were simple people, but they could put in one line.
Go ahead.
They could put in one line what it takes whole books to be able to do. It's an example of that is perfect for today. Amos preached in the streets of Israel, and he said, they don't know how to do right. They who store up wealth and violence in their strongholds. They don't know how to do right. They who store up violence and wealth in their strongholds. All right? Is that and the same goes for today. It is the billionaires that are destroying the lives of thousands of average people so they can be billionaires, and so you won't be able to do anything but obey their commands. We're looking at a change right now that the billionaires are picking out our senators and our congressmen for us and have no way to go, right? Is that so that we talk about a democracy, but you can't have a democracy when the few is deciding the future of the many. Right? Is that when we look at it, and we told them to put the companies into great organizations, now we have corporations that are deciding more about us than Congress or the Senate. Huh? We're having a change in the world around us. All right? And whenever that happens, God calls his people to preach about it. You see, but we're in a position now where a good deal of the preachers are so conservative, they think that we're living in a world where we can see all around us what shouldn't be is what is. All right? is that these billionaires destroyed the lives of thousands of average people. Is that they destroyed their pensions life. They told them to put their, one of the tricks was of the big corporations was, tell you what you do, is that you put your money invested back into the corporation, invested back into the business, and we will see that you get 50 cents on the dollar as a return on your investment if you just leave it here long enough. And while they were leaving their money thinking that they were going to be able to retire with something, be able to have enough money to really, those in charge of the corporations looted the treasury, walked away with the savings of thousands. And another way that they did it, they let the company go broke, fired thousands of the people, and then their children and their wives and their and the dreams of millions is the easiest way to put it, were destroyed, and they and the lawyers made it legal. When we look at Amos, Amos tells us, he says, and the trumpets sounded in the cities, and the people are afraid, he said. And I look around me and I see the tension all over this nation like I've never seen it before. The stress, never knowing when it's going to happen to you. Never knowing when you go down with the rest. Never knowing that you know that you're looking good today, but you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Because even the middle class, they used to always talk about the poor. Now they're talking about the middle class, all right? Is because you see the middle class has lost it as the games were being played. When everybody was looking good and not admitting that they weren't doing well. This change didn't happen in 5 or 10 years, and we have to understand that. Amos talks about the takers. He said, Amos goes on and talks about their palaces on the hills, and that they have so much money that they have ivory ceilings and ivory walls, and wood and brick and wallpaper wasn't good enough, right? Is it because they had taken so much out of the population that they could afford ivory walls and ivory ceilings? Do you understand what he's saying? Is that, and when we look around us, we see that the houses on 1,000 hills weren't all decided by God. All right, is that I remember when they were talking about California's change, and that they were building $3 million houses at a phenomenal rate. All right, it's all right to have a few, but at a phenomenal rate, right? But it was right after a good deal of the destruction of corporations. Right now, the tax. Right now, the salaries are up to 250 times for the executive what the worker makes. You can't have a democracy like that. He understood that. They don't know how to do right, he said, right? And the greed is far beyond their need. And we find ourselves in a situation where we are in the situation of that time, that there is no real difference between then and now. And when Amos was called into the city to preach the word, to protect the people, to take care of the little sheep, and that's precisely what his people need to be doing now. It makes the difference. Watch how Amos, it's just 9 chapters. It's a small book, right? But so read it when you go home. Read it every now and then during this period, because it'll prepare you for what's coming down the line. it'll prepare you to protect yourself. And see, listen to him reinterpret the idea of violence. See, we're so in the habit of thinking that to be violent you have to have guns and clubs and etc. But you see, robbery today is different from that. No one draws a gun and shoots you down, but they're killing you in the streets, but not with a gun. You see, is that now you just use bits of paper. Well, not little bits, because they come and they look very liquid. But you see, you go down with it. Is that the pieces of papers that change laws, change the laws that were made to protect, like the fences that were made to protect the little ones from the big sheep, right? All right, those laws have now been changed so that when you think you've got somebody on your side, you find when you go to your lawyer, that the lawyer has to tell you what the other lawyers have already done to you. That change of a law can make all the difference. Is that the rich pay lobbyists to have legislation make changes in just. I remember the savings and loan scandal. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
I want you to remember, because if you don't remember, you won't be ready. All right? You see, is it because it didn't start with what you got now? It starts and goes way back. They see how much they can get by with before they ever play the big game. The rich lobbyists, they now see, you just had they weren't as many lobbyists as there then as now. But the game is so good, there are so many lobbyists around, is that and there are so many rich people in Congress and the Senate that it's got to be easy, right? Yes, so you can have them there to tell you what to vote on, tell you what to change, all right? Tell you how to make the illegal legal, tell you how to do it, right? That's what a lobbyist is there for. He's not there for the little sheep. He's there for the big sheep, all right? And for a little money, they can get a lot of money, right? The game is a money game. And when we look at it, we see that the savings and loan scandal was just the beginning. Because if you don't remember the savings and loan scandal, it was planned that way. It's in the planning. It wasn't easy to put it all together. That's why it's done by the rich and the well-educated, right? It's not easy, but when they put it together, it makes the difference in your life. You see, and remember asking about forgetting? See, you're supposed to forget, because then you won't understand when it comes around again. Is that if you don't forget, maybe the middle-sized sheep and will get, if you remember, then the middle-sized sheep like us might get together, organize, and change the way they do things. Well, and I just don't say that out of space. Right now, we're faced with it. Is because they've gotten 3 or 4, we've got 7 or 8 now, Republican governors. And when they came in, well, you've read about the Wisconsin, right? And no sooner did they start coming in, they began to test the water, right, to see how far they could go. And this man, Governor Walker, tried to take away unions' rights to negotiate. And the other ones was waiting to see how he got by with it. Right? That's what it was about. But the people rose up in the street, all right? They created a people's movement in Wisconsin, right? And now he's on his way out. I went up there to make a speech, not long ago, and he was at the meeting, but boy, there was a look on his face like he was scared. He was sort of looking on each side. The people were talking about him, and every time you raised up something that would mention the understanding, didn't have to call his name, but just what was happening to unions, those who are there to help the little sheep. Yeah. And the people would rise up and they would point at him, right? He's a worried man. But the idea is to let the rest of them know, right, that we will not put up with that. We will have a democracy whether they like it or not, right? And that God is on our side, right? It has to be. One has to understand it, because if you give them a little time, then there won't be any time. It'll be all over. You see, if the little sheep don't remember, the big sheep will come back and circle around and do it again. See, that's what Enron was all about. All right. You see, after when the corporations began to do it, Enron put together some real bright guys. Right? That's right. Because they could afford it. Yeah, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? And you can buy just about anybody you want to buy in America today. It seems as though there is no sense of decency. As long as it's legal, it's all right, right? Is that but underneath it all, people are being destroyed by it. You see, is that it's violence when families are destroyed. I don't care whether it's legal or not. It's violence when children are denied a decent education, whether you've got it legal or not. It is violence when you're forced to live on less than a living wage. It is violence when people can't protect themselves from the big sheep. It is violence when Arthur Anderson cooks the books, all right? And you pay the taxes to make up for what they don't want to pay for. All right, and when we look at it, you and I have been robbed. Right? But even when we're robbed, we have to end up paying for it. One of the first ones I talked about, we're still paying for. But there's not much talk about it, because you see, the little sheep may wake up. You have to remember. When you have been taken, you have to remember when the nation has been stripped. You have to remember, right? And you have to remember how it stopped too. You have to remember how people's movements have made the difference in all of our lives. If it wasn't for the civil rights movement, we wouldn't be here today, right? It was a people's movement. Is that we got the law on our side. They passed the law, but the law didn't mean anything in the South, shall we say. So we got the right for decent schools, but by the time the big sheep started tearing down the fences, right, is that we were without a decent education. And it's not only that, we have to understand that poor white people haven't been educated either. It wasn't just for us. It's for them as well. But they don't know that. So we must let them know it. That they're the niggers in America now too, right? All right? Got to let them know it. man, right? We've proven the means, all right?
Yeah.
We've proven the method.
Yeah.
Where are the men and women going to be that backs it up today?
Go ahead, preacher.
It is not an accident that Martin is on the mall, because he taught the world. It's not an accident that people in countries that we didn't even know were there, right?
Yeah.
Don't even know the names of when they're heard. And we're supposed to be intelligent folk and went to college and all that, but we don't even know about. But they are singing our songs, all right? Because they're fighting for the same rights that we want. They are the little sheep being moved over and killed by the big sheep. Right? The struggle is between man and money. We are the men and women, right? Yeah. They have the money. But you see, we have to make certain that the money don't tell us what to do. Is that they couldn't buy Amos out.
All right.
If they could have bought Amos out, he would have been at the State House saying, if you just do this, everything will be all right, right? Is that when we look at it, is that it's a matter of public policy. That's what the struggle is about. Is that it is violence when we allow things to destroy us that shouldn't. It's about public policy, and when they change it, they just don't know how to do right. God's people must tell them what to do. God's people must stand and do it. Now watch me now, all right? Because some of it you don't like. See, what we have understood, that it's not a matter of Christianity, it's American Christianity that is now coming forth to destroy us. All right? Black Christianity is in opposition to American Christianity. That's what the conservatives are all about. Line them up. It started with Billy Graham, right? And Billy Graham didn't even know what was happening to him. He thought he was just preaching the gospel, right? But when they got through with it and started signing up behind it, it became a political juggernaut, right? And because they could tell the people what to do and tell them it was God's will. We have to decide based upon history what's God's will.
Yes.
This is why I want this scripture today. You've never heard an Old Testament scripture like this on a day like this, right? On Black History Month, right? We preach the New Testament usually, right? But we got to find out that, you see, it started way before. These was the men who led us to Jesus, and Jesus led us to the Martin Kings. All right. And we have to understand that we are part of a history that is as old as the understandings of man for a God like we've got. A God of love and truth and justice. But the love and truth nor the justice can be lived until we do it with God. God doesn't wave a wand. He's told us what to do. He's let us see Jesus die on a cross. We know there's going to be suffering in it. There is no sense of wanting something that you just think a wand's going to give you. Even God had to be on a cross before and suffer before we could have what we need to live. But it didn't happen in a moment. We've been changing the world generation by generation by generation.
Yes, sir.
It does not come immediately. It comes because we're willing to struggle for what we know is right. He's told us what's right, what's just, and it's up to us to do it. When we look at it, this shepherd, just a simple shepherd, he had all the answers. What happens when a nation allows the animals to break down the barriers what happens when we allow lawyers to change the laws that give us rights and liberty and justice is that Amos has the answer. Amos says, a nation that allows it to happen says they lose their conscience.
All right. Go ahead now.
Listen to that. Man is destroyed when he loses his conscience.
Yes, sir.
Man is destroyed. He's unable to take care of himself. But your conscience, where do you get it? The care of your soul. That's why we come to church. It's to take care of our souls. It's to make us understand what's right and wrong. God gave us a day to do nothing with, but understand what he planned for us. The great understandings under it all. We come to church thinking, well, if we just go to church. No. If you get the message of the church, and you can't get it with a 15-minute sermon either. I want you to understand that, right? Is because there's a lot more to it. Because we are average people, it is not only the mind we speak to, it is the conscience, but ultimately it is the soul itself, right? And it's only in the care of the soul can it be. A nation loses its conscience when they give their political power up for sale. You lose your conscience when they pile wealth without conscience. They don't know right from wrong when you allow money to be more important than man.
Go ahead.
All right? It's just true. They don't know how to do right.
Yes, sir. All right. Yes, sir.